So again, welcome. Thank you for making the time today. We're going to be introducing uh, the new registration system, which I'll give you some background, and then we're going to get into really how it all operates. Along the way, please just wave your hand or stop or jump in with questions. I think we have ample time, and as I said, if we have enough time after we go through the slides, which I'll share in a moment, then we'll be able to. I'll do some actually getting into Learning Stream dynamically rather than statically on these slides. So let me share the slides. All right, you see them all right now?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. So here we have a little graphical depiction of STARS moving from ActiveNet to Learning Stream. Now STARS, I still don't remember if we had a contest back in 2011 or how it got the name, but it was just our internal made-up name for the Student Administrative and Registration System. So, so that some of us have gotten in the habit of calling it STARS, and that name should have legs. Today it refers to Active Networks ActiveNet software that many of you, all of you, will have your hands on for some time. And in the future, it's going to refer to Learning Stream, which is a product of JTC Technologies out of Kentucky. So I'm going to give a little bit of background first, and then we'll get into the operational details. This current term underway, we began using Learning Stream, but it was limited only for Philosophy Works in New York. And so we didn't train everyone. Charlene, we didn't train anyone in Hudson Valley. Marilyn and Gary, we only trained the team leads because we figured there was not going to be too much volume. But now there is going to be volume because for the winter term, all of the following groups are going to be via Learning Stream. New York for Philosophy 2 and up, for everything in Hudson Valley, Philosophy Works and everything on up. Some exceptions will be for the M and S level groups that are under the annual plan. They began in September, and that's going to run out. For the M level, it runs out in the spring term. For the S level, it includes and thus therefore runs out in the summer term. So they're all sort of grandfathered in, if you will, under ActiveNet. There's no point in disrupting that whole business. We'll let it run out. Also, PPO is going to remain under ActiveNet, the online school. Some nomenclature I may fall into using along the way. What we call courses in ActiveNet or in the school in general, classes, courses, you'll see in many places in Learning Stream labels and documentation, it's called events. And we don't have the capacity to change on the screens. The good news is in most of the, I believe all of the customer-facing screens, you don't see the word events. But anyway, you may see it, you'll certainly hear it today. Similarly, there is something in Learning Stream called a database. That is very synonymous to what in ActiveNet is the customer account file. You know, if you click on that customer icon and you're setting up a new customer, so to speak, or student, that's called the database. Now, the database, the way we built it for this first term for Philosophy Works in New York, we did not require, and we will not require, a database record for Philosophy Works, but it will be required for Philosophy 2 and up. Let me explain a little bit of the rationale. The marketing team and the leadership, one of the things that attracted them to Learning Stream is that the sign-on experience should be, and this is their parlance, frictionless, meaning as easy as possible, as few clicks, sign up, get it over with. Don't have to concern themselves with the name, and well, they have to put in name, but they don't have to put in address, telephone number. It's basically first name, last name, and email address, and you're off to the races. But for the plan is, and Karen and Barry and I have been working on this now, enabling the database for the subsequent terms so that we'll have more of a repository of information. Now, the general plan is that we're not going to be importing records from ActiveNet into Learning Stream. I want to hold that as a possibility to revisit it. There are pros and cons to doing so. ActiveNet, as it indicates here, was first used 9 years ago in the summer of 2011. And as of this October, there were 18,777 customer account records in that customer file. So when we first started thinking about it, whoa, do we port all of those? And that just seemed monumental. We took a second view, and if you just look at the students that are active in New York and Hudson Valley this past term, which wouldn't include Part 1 in New York, because they're already in Learning Stream, but they don't have customer records. But there are 629 students in ActiveNet that were active in New York and Hudson Valley. So the one possibility is that we port them, but there are pros and cons. It's not going to be an elegant, smooth process. There will be issues. And on the other side, it may be good, not a bad thing for people to just, some people have changed email addresses. It's a time to refresh these kinds of things. I mean, the negative of it is if we have lines at the registrar's desk, this will slow it down a little bit.
When you mentioned those 600 people, were you including in your thinking what we now call events, lectures, study days?
No. What I did is I did an extract on just the people that were in philosophy classes in New York and Hudson Valley. I did include the S and the M level, who wouldn't need to do this until sometime down the road. Okay. But nevertheless, that did not include events. Okay.
It's interesting that in STARS, what we call events have to be called courses.
Not really, but I mean, because there is a course type, and the type is events, but I
cool.
digress.
Yeah, okay.
Just again, as I say here, for historical purposes, there were close to 750,000 attendance records in ActiveNet as of this past month. Again, it's going back 10 years. There is no way to port that into Learning Stream anyway, because you might imagine the data structures are rather different. It's not as simple as like a name and address kind of thing. So the idea is that we're going to be exporting both the customer account and the attendance records from ActiveNet into Excel spreadsheets for, as I say, historical purposes. And that was a Freudian slip in my typing. And there may be some elegant things we can do, what are called pivot tables or filtering and so forth, so that we can still do some lookups in these Excel spreadsheets. But the good news is, for the time being, since ActiveNet will still be around, since it's going to be in place at least through the summer of 2020, you could go into the old customer account record if there's a query that you need to research. But ultimately, the plan would be to offload that, before we sunset ActiveNet. Any questions so far?
Just so if students register themselves, they'll be registering in the new system then.
That's correct. That's correct.
There might be a learning curve there for them.
No pun intended. Learning Stream, learning curve. Yes, you're absolutely you're absolutely right. One hopes. Look, one hopes it's user friendly. That's why we selected this system. But my experience is, no matter how user-friendly you make it, there's still some part of the population. I sort of imagine they're at home rubbing the mouse on the screen or something. I mean, it's just, systems. Again, it's a wide range of comfort.
That's not how it's done.
Thank you, Jerry. Okay, moving right along.
We'll see how it goes.
All right, very good. Wait, hang on. This just in, and literally yesterday afternoon, I received word from the leadership in New York, and I've spoken with Mr. Wigman this morning, and I found out that while the email I got was about New York, it also is going to pertain to Hudson Valley.
Yes.
The fee is changing. Philosophy Works is going to be offered as a gift, meaning totally free. There's not even going to be the old $10 administrative fee. And just as an aside, the marketing team is going to work on a new ad with Sub Rosa, the branding company. You may have seen their designs on the website, and they can perhaps return to happiness, or likely return to it as the main element. Stay tuned. So this, for those of you who remember when we first went to the $10 fee back in 2014, and we had like 1,300 people show up, we ended up, just as a matter of honoring the fire code in the building, putting certain caps in place. And so the leadership, when they wrote to me, was mindful of that. The idea that each section of Part 1 will be capped at a number to be decided shortly. We've got time because I forget, Karen Barry, we talked about maybe setting it at 60 to begin with. Maybe it'll go up to 70
Yeah.
per room, so 120 on Monday night, something like that. We've got time before they're getting close to the ceiling, and I would chase up, I would expect to have heard by then, or I'll chase up what is the real number that we need to cap. But we are going to go back to sectioning. And again, Charlene, I also spoke to Mr. Wigman about this, and he wants to keep the way we did it this term, Beacon and Wallkill, indistinguishable.
Okay.
In other words, if you just sign up once, you don't have to nail down which are the two locations.
All right.
We may have a conversation if I start seeing us get up towards some ceiling, at the Howland Center. I'm not quite sure what their occupancy limit is, but we'll talk about it. Because again, if it's free, no one knows what's going to happen. And so what we're going to do in New York is, instead of this, we have this term, which is one indistinguishable enrollment, vary your night of attendance from week to week, wide open, that kind of thing. We're going to again segment it. We're not going to segment it as strongly as we did back in 2014. So back in 2014, we had, 2 rear separated from 3 rear kind of thing.
Right.
It's going to be Monday night. All right. And it's going to be, let's say, for argument's sake, 120 seats for Monday night, 60 in each room or something like that, whatever the number is times 2. But the downside is there'll be one large attendance sheet for Monday night. And it'll also possibly reincur, and Karen and I were chatting about this yesterday, the challenges of, what we called a one-time transfer and a permanent transfer. So we'll have to consider some of that and how that might work. This is literally breaking. I mean, we heard about this yesterday afternoon, so we're starting to think about the implications. All right.
I interrupt. When we had the transfers,
yes,
a couple of years ago, Karen pointed out that it's so difficult to keep up with that.
She and I had a conversation about that already. And in addition, the question of taking attendance, even though we discovered a better way that wouldn't blow it up. Let's take that offline, because what I'd like to do is set up a couple of test cases.
Yeah.
To actually explore how to do that, number one. And number two, the next point that you see here that I sort of skipped over is each section capped at a number. Once the number has been reached, the class will be closed. The registrant can then either register for a different day or time or go on a waiting list. Now, we've not explored yet the waiting list functionality within LearningStream. So my intention over the next days is to set up a phony class with a 3-person limit or 2-person limit, and quickly go over the limit, and then see, is my understanding at the moment, is that a waiting list would allow you to enter the class for which you're on the waiting list. What's being suggested in what was communicated is you'd be allowed into the class next term. So I don't know if that means faking it out by letting them into this class and then transferring them from this class to that class. This all is very, very new and I don't want to get too bogged down on it. The other detail to mention here is students currently in Part 1 will be offered a one-time only free Part 2 in the winter term. And it makes sense if you think about it. I'm going into Part 2. I'm hearing that these people for the class that I just spent $90 are getting in free.
Yeah.
Right? So the only piece of this is a little problematic, and I would probably go back to the leadership, is it says only for those people that were students currently in Part 1. Well, we do have situations where someone who was in Part 1 a couple of terms ago comes back to Part 2. Our ability to distinguish between those and the ones that were here last term becomes problematic. So my intention is to go back to the leadership and say, look, for the 4 or 5, maybe 6 tops people that come in that were 2 terms ago and get in on a free, what's the big deal versus the hassle of having to publish to the website the higher rate and mail to those eligible the free rate. I mean, and then worry about them sharing the free rate with someone else. Just open it up and take the risk.
Is that Hudson Valley as well? The free Part 2?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Oh, does that include Hudson Valley as well? The free Part 2?
Yes.
Randolph, do the Part 1s who will get the free tuition in Part 2, do they have to have, met the requirements to go on to part two? You know,
That's a-
can somebody who's there 3 times then?
That's a very, very good question, Kathy, to the extent that Karen is now taking over the leadership. I would leave, no, because depending on how you answer, look, we don't have mechanisms in place to automatically
Exactly.
enforce that. It was just my insanity that I'd be monitoring some of this stuff and looking up people's attendance records. And, you know, we would often have what I call the Freudian cry for help, where someone would sort of announce themselves by writing some strange email. And all of a sudden it caused me to dig deeper, and I'd find out, oh, you know, but you're not entitled to go to I-1 or something.
Right.
You know, so that happens on an exception, not a systematic basis.
Right.
So I think the general intention, Kathy, would be to honor the policies and procedures that we have published on the website.
Right.
Enforcement
But
of it,
it might slip by. I mean, there might be a.
and I wouldn't lose, yes, and I wouldn't lose sleep about it.
And then, may I just one more question? The attendance capability of Learning Stream, is that similar to ActiveNet, or?
Very similar, because it was not, and we paid for an enhancement.
Okay.
And so you'll see that the attendance sheet is exactly, they very much mimicked what ActiveNet does for the attendance sheet. It's a turnaround document that shows you the check marks and has spaces for you to put check marks. The
Great,
other side
okay.
of it, the entry of it, I believe, is more elegant than I see Karen nodding her head. You've been involved
Yes.
with that?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. I mean, the ultimate goal, but we've always had problems with consistent Wi-Fi in the building, not to mention secretaries who can't navigate iPads. But if we ever got to a stage where we had those pieces in place, it actually is rather user-friendly to be able to do it right then and there as people.
Yeah, that would be great. Oh, wow.
Great, but there are certain inhibitors that have stopped that. All right, if I'm going to move on, because we have a lot to cover.
Question.
Barry, can you put yourself on mute?
Yeah.
Okay.
Uh,
So
quick-
thank you. All right. So here are the topics. I'm sorry. Yes, Jerry.
Oh, the question of when you have 2 meetings on one evening, like Monday in 2 meetings, can the people move from?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Very good question. The simple answer, Barry, could you put yourself on mute, please? Thank you. The simple answer is yes. Because it's just too much business to try to lock them in from one versus the other. Yeah, it's, you know, we've done that with name tags, and it's gonna, the simple way it's gonna flow is people will come in, and the greeters will have to have some way of communicating. Sometimes we've done these little tags. Sometimes we've had people keeping like a little hashtag, you know, little tallies. Oh, we've already got about 30 people in 3 front.
Right,
Let's start
right.
sending them to 4 front, kind of thing. You know, somebody runs up and down and does rebalancing. But if of a week they come from one and move to the other, no harm, no foul.
Great.
Okay, thank you. Good question. All right, so you have, I think you can see up on the screen the training topics. We're going to go into logging in, although has everybody been successful in logging in so far? Anybody not?
I was, yes, last week, but not today. Is it,
No, you don't need to. No, I mean, when you get a chance, you might try again. I have no reason to suspect if it happened once, it shouldn't happen again. Okay, so everybody was able to log in?
last
Yes.
week?
Okay, good. All right, so I'll fly through those screens. We're going to talk about registering. And registering, as I'll highlight as we go through it, is really now in 2 pieces. In a way, it was always in 2 pieces in ActiveNet. You get the person's information, and then you would take the payment. But here it's even more distinctly these 2 different pieces. And I make a distinction when capturing the basic data with and without setting up a database account. Because again, if you remember, I said part 1 is not going to require a database account. So what I mean by capturing the information depends on, is this a part 1 student? Then it's rather simple. If it's a part 2 or some other student, then there are going to be a few more data elements that need to be captured. By the way, I'm still waiting to hear back from the leadership. There are questions, I'm dangerous phrasing it like this, there are questions about gender and also date of birth and certain other fields that have been, you know, ActiveNet grew up as a sports thing, and so we always had hoped not to have to capture all that information, although it did allow us to do certain reporting. But we're waiting to hear back whether all of those things will be required. So, all right, so capturing the basic data, processing the payment. Similarly, on the reverse end, if you cancel a registration,
I'm
you also
sorry,
cancel the, just one moment, Marilyn. You would
Okay.
cancel the registration itself, and then you would undo the payment part of it. Yes, Marilyn.
I'm only seeing an Excel sheet. Am I supposed to be seeing something else?
Right,
Excel sheet.
that's what I see.
That's all I'm seeing too.
Not seeing the
Really?
training topics.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, this whole time?
You're right.
Yeah.
Oh, I beg your pardon. I shared the wrong thing. So you missed my
We
whole,
are.
That's,
the great graphics for breaking news?
Yes.
Now we see it.
now we see it, yeah.
Oh my goodness. Okay. And I'd gone through all of the different, I'm so terribly sorry. I thank you for
But your
bringing that up.
explanations were so perfect. That it
Yeah,
doesn't matter.
you really
Yeah.
didn't notice
Yeah.
that there wasn't.
Thank you. I'm going to give you another 10, 15 minutes to stop that kind of talk. Okay. So, all right, very good. So, yeah, we talked about stars. We had this great
Right.
opening script. Okay, very nice.
Randolph, as long as we have a little pause, I'd like to bring to your attention the tuition forwards you set in place.
No, I don't want to get into it now, Barry. Thank you.
Okay.
So all right, so this details out. I'm going to send you not only a recording of this, but I will send you these slides if you want to refer to something. And that doesn't mean you can't get in touch and raise questions, but it would be like a primary resource that you can get, take reference to. Okay, so again, I'm just going through the topics very quickly.
Right.
Registration, having these two pieces of getting the data and processing the payment. Canceling the registration. Similarly, you'd cancel the registration, but you'd also deal with the payment, either a refund or credit card. And there is a way to delete a payment transaction. Let's say you started to set something up in error, and it's not a matter of a refund, just get rid of it. So we'll talk about that. I'll show you how to edit the student's basic information, whether it's within a Part 1 or in a database record. There is something that's kind of interesting called a history log. We'll look at that. And then there are some other things you may not use on a day-to-day basis in terms of overriding a fee. If there's a situation where a level head or somebody in authority tells you, this person's not going to pay the standard fee, here's how you would override that, make an adjustment. We will get into, and Barry, maybe later would be the time to raise your question, there are going to be ways to affect what we fondly know as a tuition forward. Or you could do some transfers. I put somebody signed up for Part 3 and they meant to go into Part 4. How would you do, how would you do a simple transfer? And then there are going to be some reporting topics. The first one, the administrative payment summary, would be familiar to those of you who do that daily close report. And how do you generate an attendance sheet to put in the books?
Great.
And Karen, if we have time, I'm also ready to speak about, there was yet another report you and I talked about. Anyway, I'll come on to that towards the end.
Okay.
Zoning on what it was. All right. So moving right along, logging in. As I said, since you've all been successful, I'm going to skip over this, except to say you may have noticed that when you do click the login, the default view has been set to go to the events that are posted live. The
Right.
system would let you come to what they call their dashboard. I didn't think that was too interesting. It would let you come to the non-posted, which are, by the way, as with many system and replacements, you'll find analogies. So for example, what Learning Stream calls posted live, back in the ActiveNet days, we called open. What they call not posted, we've called tentative. So there are things that you're building that aren't ready for prime time yet. And there is a setting where you could have those show up, but I said, no, when people log in, show them the live events. And here is an example. So when you click it, you go to the live events, and the next level down would be to select the event that you wish. These are the ones that are posted live. Something a little strange within Learning Stream. Here it's called posted live, and a number of other places it's called posted live. But in this screen, you notice it's called current events. It's the same thing. It's not two different things. I don't know why they just didn't have consistent nomenclature. Okay, so posted live is also known as current events, as distinct from not posted, which is what we would know as a tentative, and past events we'd probably know as closed, and archived we'd probably know as retired, for those of you who have played with courses in ActiveNet in these various states. All right, so moving right along, again, when you click on the title This is now getting into doing a registration, all right?
Mhm.
So you're in events, those that are posted live, and then you would select or click the title. For example, Philosophy Works. Now, when you go out there, you may not see the titles that are in this training. I've been switching them around. For example, when I learned that Philosophy 2 is also going to be free, you'll see you get a homework assignment at the end, and it does.
I don't know if we're just actually able to speak to each other.
I'm sorry, Barry.
I am.
Hang on.
Thank you. Okay, so the gotta love technology, right? So one nice feature is if you're looking down the list, right now it's a small list, but in due course, and I hope somewhere over the next several weeks, you're gonna have 30, 40, 50 courses here. So there is a way to use filtering. There's something that's called a category, and the categories we're going to establish will be very familiar to you. Foundation, I level, N level, M level, etc. You could also filter by location, Charlene, if you want to just simply look at the Hudson Valley folks. That'll bring up all your classes, probably fit on one screen.
Yes.
So, but you can also search by part of the name or start date, things like that. All right, so you can narrow down the list. Having done that, again, registration is a two-step affair. We're going to register the student, and then we're going to process the payment. Let's get into it. When you click on that, so again, I'm going to back up. As if I clicked on one of the titles, the next thing you see looks like this. This is now within that particular course, Philosophy Works test, September 9th. This was just a test that I set up to begin on that date at 7 o'clock. It's not real. And it's got some phony names. With the first thing you'll see is a screen that has some commands on the left-hand side, home, preview event, financial, etc., some reports. We'll come back to that. But in the center of it, you'll see the list of students, and you'll see the function we're going to do at the moment is new individual registration. Makes sense, right? You can, by the way, click on one of these buttons. I believe it governs the last name.
Yes.
Clicked on a K. Kathy, you've explored that? That's
Yes.
Yeah, because the other piece of it, if you put in search some, a couple, 3 characters, it'll find it whether it's in the first name or the last name,
Yes.
which is kind of cool. I always say enter as few characters as possible, because if you're looking for Kathy, but she set herself up as Kathleen, just enter K-A-T and you'll get it. That kind of thing. So again, now having gotten here, I'm not dealing with an existing person. We're going to come back to these things and what this all means in a moment. But for now, I'm just going to click a new individual registration. And I'm going to make a distinction whether we're dealing with a Part 1 student or anybody else. So for a Part 1 student, this is for a non-database event. In other words, Philosophy Works. It's very simple. As I said, first name, last name, email address, you got to put in twice, and you got to say the method of payment. So this is it blank, and then down below I'm showing it sort of playing around with a test first name and a test last name, and I set it up to go to the registration, not because it has to, but just so there's a confirmation email, and I didn't want it to go into the blue. I had it go to the registration. But this would be the student's email address, not the registration app email address. Everything making sense so far? Any questions?
Well, Hudson Valley Philosophy Works going to be a non-database event?
Yes, that's correct.
Oh.
Yeah. So this would be their view. It's very, again, this was the whole idea. It's very frictionless. The problem is if you want to call somebody, forget about it. You don't call them.
Randolph,
Yes, Barry.
the new registration for Philosophy Works will be free.
Yes.
So what about method of payment?
I did not set up a test for that yet, but I believe I've looked at it, and that doesn't even show up.
Okay.
Yeah, that doesn't even show up. And there's some other things that I've modified because of the fact that we're now moving it into multiple sections instead of the one big section. You'll see in a moment I've modified what's called the registration form to distinguish, to make sure they know what they're signing up for. Otherwise, it would just say Philosophy Works. I'm introducing additional information, but we'll come on.
I hope Learning Stream is not like STARS, where it prevents you to move ahead if you don't fill everything out.
Well, everything in red has to be filled out, but I'm making a note, and I'm going to double check. I'm pretty sure I saw it that for the free, and if we have time, we can do it right now, that the free is not even going to say method of payment.
Cool. Okay.
Okay? So it's
And that would go for part 2.
part 2, correct. As in also. Yes. Yes. Good.
Not for, not for everybody though.
Well, no, Kathy, what I'm saying is I'm not going to go through the hassle of trying to discriminate those that are coming to part 2 from the 100.
Oh, I see, right.
No, it's
Sorry.
just too much of a burden. If
It
they
is.
come to part 2, the karma's on them, and
Right.
maybe it results in a bigger enrollment. So what, in the scheme of things? If we're talking about 6 people that play us like that,
Right.
they won't even know they're playing us, right? They'll just show up, it'll be free. Hey, great. Okay.
Okay.
Again, the motivation, which I think is entirely right, is that people who paid $90 this term are going to have people coming in next term paying nothing.
Right.
So we're giving them
Yeah.
part 2 for one term, as a makeup, if you will, for that.
Right.
Okay, good. All right, so this is in the non-database event, so Philosophy Works, capturing the basic data. For a database event, you now have 2 different paths you can go, and I would recommend ideally the first one, either to select an existing, or we're going to talk about creating a new record. But again, now this preference that I'm expressing is meaningless for this upcoming term because everybody's going to be new.
Oh,
But in the
Mhm.
future, the ideal would be similar to today, is that you find them in the existing, what we now call the customer database, and they just call the database. So again, you have the similar search and the similar letters that you can smack on. If somebody comes in, you can type a few digits of the name and find them right away, in which case you would just hit select. And having selected an existing registrant, it basically is presenting you with the information they've entered before, and you really don't need to, you might eyeball it, if somebody presents something has changed, but again, it's at this moment in time, this is what I have in the database. I'm still waiting for leadership to come back and say whether there are going to be other attributes that we should capture. But right now, it's the only thing additional to the non-database, which was first name and last name and email address, is their street address and phone number.
Mhm.
And you would again click submit registration. Don't worry about, we're not doing anything with name tags at present, so I haven't explored that much.
And of course, we'd want to verify the email address again. Just make sure it's correct.
Nice.
If you have the time and you can swing the screen to the person and say, look at this, is that their current address? Yeah, by all means. It's a judgment call.
Okay.
All right, moving right along.
I have a quick question.
Yes,
If-
please.
If part 2 is free for those now taking part 1, is it a database event or not?
Very good question. My assumption right now, because nobody said explicitly differently, but it's very much a question I had, is that they will also be database people. In other words, the original direction I got from leadership is this frictionless business is just for part 1.
Okay.
It was not connected to free, but I absolutely, the same similar thought went through my mind, Charlene. But let me wait and see what the leadership comes back with, and I'll update you. All right, but my going in assumption, just one sec here. My going in assumption, just to repeat, is that everything north of part 1 is going to be a database.
Right.
That sounds right.
Gary, yes, you had a question.
For Philosophy Works, will it be a generic enrollment or specific days that people will register for?
Okay, when I was talking about sections, the latter, okay, is the simple answer. When I was speaking before about sections, that's what I meant. We're no longer going to be able to have, you can vary your night of attendance from week to week. We may well have that for Philosophy 2, where we're not at risk of hitting a fire code, but for part 1, and what's called the elasticity of demand, meaning you lower the price and the quantity desired goes up, right? We could have, who knows? We really don't know at this moment what the effect, but we have to prepare for it being that general rule that if you lower the price, you're gonna get a lot of response. So in order to protect against that, we're going to segment it, not as tightly as we did back in 2014, where we segmented 2 rear and 3 rear. So we're not going to segment 3 front and 4 front, or whatever the rooms might be. And by the way, leadership is on the hunt to find additional tutors and teams and all the things that go with it. But it will be, you are signing up for Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday morning, Wednesday night, Thursday night, or Saturday morning. And all of each of those, with the exception of Wednesday morning, will have 2 rooms. But it's still going to be one big attendance sheet for each of those, what did I say, 5, 6 days and times. Not one huge one because it could be too big. Unfortunately, if you have 120 people or so, you know, of an evening, you know, you're going to be flipping through, you know, 6 pages or so. Yeah.
And
Yes,
if someone is ill or on a business trip, what? What then?
you're talking about somebody on the team? They get a
No,
substitute.
someone in the class.
Different night.
Okay, again, I touched on it briefly before, guys. We're going to explore what we talked about, we've had prior to this term, which is the one-time
Good.
and the permanent transfer. And we have to do a little bit of experimenting apropos, what does that do to attendance and so forth. So we've got to do a little bit of exploring, but the general going in largesse would be, you know, on an exception basis, if you have to go to another evening, fine. You know, there's always the risk of tutor shopping. Somebody finds out so-and-so is on Thursday night, and all of a sudden you get a, you know, an upsurge in people wanting to transfer. We'll try to accommodate that up to the the room limits. I'm sorry, Charlene, did you have a question?
No, no.
Okay, very good. All right.
Another question. So let's say the classes are closed out and capped.
Yes.
Would it be allowable to have a one-time transfer even?
Let's cross that bridge when we come to it.
Okay.
All right, let me get through the training. I know we're getting into a lot of process issues, but let's make it through the training.
Okay.
So
I'll shut up.
no, you could talk. Just put yourself on mute. That's fine.
You read lips so well.
Thank you for your good humor. Our teamwork is okay. So for a database event, as I said, either you would select an existing or you would click create a new registrant, right? That was an option that was here before. And in this path, I said, well, this is someone we find that's already there. We could click select and just eyeball their stuff. And if it looks good, you hit submit registration. But in the case of it, you're creating a new registrant. It's very similar, except it's got those several additional data elements. Now, here's one thing I mean to reach out to LearningStream to make sure I'm correct, but it seems for the life of me you have to enter a password, which is unfortunate. So I'm recommending, it's got to be 7 digits, or maybe 8. Anyway, I'm recommending using R123456 the student is going to be required to update it when to one of their choosing. We don't want to know what it is. I would rather not even have to do this, but it appears to me from my experimenting, unless I'm missing something, which I'll explore with the vendor, you do have to enter a password as you're setting up an account for a new registrant. So put in some bogus number. It just has to have 1 letter, and it's got to be, I think, a length of 7. So actually, I probably could have done R1 through 6. But anyway, you'll get it working, and then they will have to change it when they log in. I'm going to move along a little bit more quickly because we do have a lot to get through here. So what's going to happen then, after you click submit registration, whichever path you came through, register a database person, non-database person, the final action, the verb is submit registration. You will see them now appear. It's a little hard to see, but you'll see them appear in that list of registrants that was being presented before. You will also note on the right-hand side, there is the fee. Again, this is for a class that does have a fee, right? So when I did this example, it might not have been the best one because this was before I found out it was going to be totally free. But you'll see an amount due. And the student's also going to get a confirmation email. So now we're going to go on to receiving the payment. Okay. Now, I said I was going to explain this business on the left-hand side. Now I'll start to explain it. This is a presentation of the list of students underneath a particular course or event. Again, you can search, you can narrow down the list, you can tap one of these buttons to have everybody beginning with the letter K or whatever. But you'll see your people and you'll see a status. Most of them should be confirmed. You may see canceled. And again, this is a play space at the moment, what you're looking at, where I was playing around with a lot of test phony names. But for those that are confirmed, the icons on the left, the rightmost one is this cancel function, which makes sense. If they're already canceled, you don't have that cancel function, you have re-register. But otherwise, the other buttons are edit, financials, and then again, cancel or re-register. Generally makes sense? Okay.
Yeah.
So now, since we're up to doing the payment for this person, we're going to click the $ for the student that we just enrolled, for whom you wish to process the payment. So I would look for the person. They may or may not appear on that screen, depending on how many people are there. You might have to search for them. It's a little unfortunate. It doesn't present you with the person you just entered the registration to process the payment. You got to find them.
Just one little shortcut, maybe. If you go over to the extreme right, it will show $90. It
Very
won't show.
Excellent. That's right. You're looking for someone who's owing money.
Right.
And, yeah, excellent. That's a good point.
Having done that myself.
No, nice. Very good. So, but again, obviously, you want to make sure you're paying the right.
Yes. Oh,
person.
definitely.
The right person is $90. But yes, very good.
Yeah.
So then, when you click the financial, when you click that $, it brings up a screen like I'm illustrating at the bottom, and you'll see enter payment as one possibility. We'll come back to some of these others in a little bit. So having clicked enter payment, you're presented with, okay, what type of payment? And there's a whole list, and I don't understand why we can't eliminate the ones like PayPal, which we're never going to use. I haven't explored comp yet, but I wonder if we ever had somebody who got comped, whether we would use that as a way. There's a way you could also just override the fee down to 0. But for now, let's just focus on the fact that there are 4 basic payment methods: check, credit card. They call it e-check. ActiveNet called it, I think, ECP, electronic something
Right.
processing. It's basically you get to reference a checking or a bank account, right? Or cash. Cash is king. So in this first case, the illustration is if you selected check, and again, this should be very familiar to you, presented with a screen where you could put in the check number. The only thing that's required is what's in red, which is the amount. It is useful to put in the check number. There's no need to, and in fact, I'd encourage you not to put in the deposit date. Who knows when it's, if you're working on a Friday or Saturday, whatever, it's not required. It's not really our business. Really, the main thing I would look for is the amount and a check number. And then you would hit Save Changes, and that's it. And then you would see, this is not a good example because I have an amount.
0.
The amount due doesn't make sense, and the amount of $1 being put in doesn't reference that. But typically, the amount due would be the same as the amount that you're putting in, unless you're setting up a partial payment. So again, I was making some play illustrations here, and they weren't entirely correct. But usually, you'd see the amount due, and that would be the amount of the check that you're looking at in your hand, and you'd put that amount in here. Yes, Jerry.
You just mentioned a partial payment. Will the payment plan situations also be reflected in this?
Okay. I'm not ready to get deeply into payment plans.
Okay.
Very simply because, unlike ActiveNet, LearningStream allows only one payment plan besides Pay in Full. So it does, of course, do Pay in Full, but in ActiveNet today, I can say pay twice a term, pay 3 times a term. For the annual payment, I can say pay each term. I can pay over 10 or 12 months.
Right.
I made a proposal. I'm waiting to hear back from the leadership. My proposal is, since I can only pick one, let's set up the gentlest. So 3 times a term or 12 times a year or something like that. In other words, the one that hits people's cash flow the least. But here's the other major difference, which we've got to, the leadership I'm waiting for a comeback on, is LearningStream does not automatically charge a credit card every month, the way like just the other night.
Right.
Yeah, I heard a groan in the audience.
Yes. It was me.
Because you can imagine, what it does is it'll send out a statement via email.
Yeah.
Well, we have students that don't have emails. We have students that have emails but never use email. We have
Yeah.
students that sometimes do but will ignore something like that. They need to take the active step of clicking on a link and then on a screen doing a payment. And that's the way they would avoid having to come into the office. So can you say after me, billing and collections?
Ugh.
It's going to be,
That's going to be a separate department.
yes, thank you. Anyway, it wouldn't be a service assignment. Anyway,
Yeah, it will be.
Collection.
all right. So stay tuned. We don't have that all worked out yet, Jerry, but the framework, a general framework is out there, and I'm not going to go into it
Fair enough.
anymore. All right. So you can edit a payment transaction. See, once you've set up that payment, if you then hit the $, you'll see their original registration and the payment. And the nice thing is that the amount due will be 0. In other words, you'll see the original event fee, you'll see the payment, you'll see that
Right.
it was 0. If for some reason you needed to edit that, there is an edit button now and a delete button alongside that check payment, and you can modify it. Maybe you typed in the check number incorrectly, any number of reasons. All right, moving along. How are we doing?
And is that on the same moment? Not you can't go back and do it.
Yes, you can go back and do it.
I mean, I mean a day later or 2 days
Yes,
later.
a day later, 2 days
Oh, you
later.
can?
do it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Now I'm speaking about a check. I'm going to come on to credit
Right.
cards in a moment. The horse might be out of the barn on the credit card. Okay.
Okay.
No, you can't delete a credit card payment. You can only refund it.
Right.
Okay. So let's get into credit cards. So the one difference which should be obvious is, you're not being asked for a check number. You're being asked for the typical information. It may or may not be the full amount. The amount due is $1, but you could put in 50 cents, again, in this example. If for some reason there was an agreement for a partial payment, you could, in effect, do it. You get an acknowledgement. I'm not sure if I created this illustration properly, because this looks like something that would go to the student in their home, but then it says return to payment details. So I think this is what you will see. And then you'll see, again, a status who's originally 90. They paid 90 by credit card. There's nothing due. And you'll see the original registration. And then now, instead of being able to edit or delete, you can view or refund. Okay, so you can't edit the credit card payment. You can view it or refund it. Now, there's certain caveats I'm going to come on to a moment about credit cards, but just to complete the different types, there's also the e-check where you'd put in the bank account number and the ABA routing number. That's all should be very familiar. And then
Cash.
let's see. Why did I skip over cash? Did I miss cash? How could I miss cash? I apologize. Well, you can just imagine what cash is.
Yes.
I apologize. I thought I had it. Anyway, it's very straightforward. It's just you do have to say the amount of the cash that you took, and that you can also edit or delete. So, all right. So let me move along. After this is done, you can come back in, and in the financial area where before we clicked edit payment, there's also the possibility to click view statement. And we have to work out the flow, of people coming in and your capacity to print this in the lobby. But this is the way that you would print something for them to give the, because if they come in after the roster's already gone upstairs, this would be a way of giving them a receipt and also something they could hand the secretary. But let me move through that quickly. There may be questions, but it's better to deal with that a little bit.
Just one thing, if there was anything we could change, I think that would be great. That right as you put the payment in, that something could come up immediately and print.
It's not going to happen.
Oh, it's not. Okay.
Yeah, that's
Randolph,
Yes, Barry.
will we still be able to have view statement and print it if there's no fee attached?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So what the public sees when they're registering, again, this is for a what's called the Philosophy Works bypasses what's called the event page. I'm going to show you an event page. There's an event page. An event page is very similar in a way to what we'd have in the details of course details in ActiveNet. You can have all different descriptive information and a button to click register now. This is the public view. And this, as I say in the heading, is an example of the event page that's seen by the public for all courses except Philosophy Works. There is a facility to bypass the event page. And the design team, because they had all of this information on the web page, they felt it was unnecessary to present this information a second time. So on the website, when they click for Philosophy Works, that they want to register, they bypass this and they go directly to so this is called the event page, and the other page is called the registration form. And there is a way to bypass the event page, which we do for Philosophy Works, and they go immediately to this, which is the registration form. Because that's all they need to do. Now, in today's world, when they click Submit Registration, they're brought to something that looks like, I had it here somewhere, the public view of a credit card. I think it's further down. Yeah, this is what they see to pay. Okay, so, again, credit card information. Again, this will not be the case for part 1. It will not be the case for part 2. But for part 3, as an example, the flow would be, we do expect them to see the event page, unless the design team tells me, no, we got that covered on the website. Planning to have this appear. They'll go from the event page to the registration form. For part 2 and up, the registration form will be a little bit more involved because they're filling out those other database fields. And then they will go to this remittance page for the monies. So again, depending on, 1, 2, and 3 are going to be somewhat different. 1 is going to bypass this registration form. It's going to go directly to the event page, and there's not going to be any money. So once they click Submit Registration, they're done. Part
It's
2,
like an Eventbrite registration.
what did I say?
Oh, I thought you said learn. I'm sorry. I didn't hear you. Sorry.
This is not Eventbrite. There's no Eventbrite involved here.
No, I know, but it's almost like that, where there's no money,
No, fair. Yeah, very good. So again, part 1 is going to have a path of going from the event form and being done. Part 2 is going to go from the event, excuse me, I beg your pardon, I made a mistake. Part 1 is going to go from the registration form, bypassing the event page. No remittance, done. So they just see one page, the registration form. Part 2 is going to see the registration form, which will be a little bit different because it'll have the database fields. They'll also see the event page, but they'll also bypass the payment. And part 3 and up should see all 3 of them. They'll start at the event page. Where is it? That looks like this, describing part 3, bringing them to the registration form to enter their information, including the database form, and then they'll be off to the remittance like this.
If they submit the registration form, will this remittance form immediately show itself?
Which part are we talking about?
3 and up, let's say.
Yes. Yeah, they have to pay. They can't complete without that.
Is there any way they can submit registration and think they're done?
What people think is outside of my purview. But there should be a confirmation. There will be a confirmation that's sent. And if they, if their computer blows up before they're finished, one would hope they'd be aware that they didn't finish it.
This is not a fanciful.
They've got to click here to process credit card.
Okay, because there are a lot of people who've come in and registered or submitted something, set up an account,
Yeah, well,
and
again,
then thought they paid,
I understand. And the Europeans, I've learned, use the word register differently than we do. They use register to refer to setting up an account. They use enroll, and they spell it with just one L, to reference what we would call registration, right? We call registration the whole event. You got to get an account. You got to sign up, sign up and pay for a particular account. So to your point, Barry, yes, people sometimes think they have enrolled when in fact they've just set up an account. I won't hold it out entirely, but they should hit this. They should hit this button. I'm going to start to pick up the pace a little bit. So canceling, as I mentioned, is also a 2-step process. You cancel the basic enrollment or registration, and then you either do a refund or a tuition forward. Now, again, I mentioned this legend or these different icons before. So now we're going to be clicking the one that's designated as meaning cancel. So click the cancel button for the student that you enrolled for whom you wish to cancel the registration. That's in the list. And then below, I'm showing what will appear when you click that button. You'll see their information. And I did this, by the way, for a non-database course. I'm not sure sitting here whether you'll see the full database information if you're canceling it for part 2 and up that has a database record. But basically, you would simply eyeball it and then click cancel registration. We'll come back to transfer in a moment as another option. Now, that's the first of the 2 pieces. You canceled the registration. But actually, if you looked at that person having canceled the registration and not having dealt yet with their remittance, they would have a $90 or so credit balance on their account. So now you have to deal with that. And these are some notes pretty straight out of Learning Streams. I've augmented a little bit. To issue a refund for a credit card, we're going to go back and click on the financial icon and then click refund and enter the amount to be refunded. But Learning Stream calls out the fact that refunds may be prevented for a number of reasons. Refunds of recent transactions may not be able to be processed because they may not have processed. You know, if somebody walks in, makes a mistake, and 10 minutes later you're trying to refund a credit card, that credit card may not have been processed yet. So you may not be able to. I think the general guidance I'd leave here is try it, and if you run into a problem, either diary a note to try again later, or get in touch with the ICs. So again, it's giving you various remedies. I'll send along these slides. I'm not going to take time in diving into each of them. It has to do with, you know, trying again, or if you're trying to refund something that's way old, it may not be possible. Any number of situations.
And we enter the amount that less than 20%. It doesn't automatically default to that.
That's correct. It will not automatically default to that. Yes, it's up to you to, you know, impose those policies. Thank you. Good question. Okay, so if you just want to, again, doing what we just said, to click the $ for the student. So again, we clicked the cancel button before, and that person may now have a credit balance on their account, similar to what, Kathy, you stopped me up before to say, hey, if you see somebody with a $90, that's because you haven't processed the payment. This, I think, is going to be a minus 90 because it's sitting on their account and they don't owe it. We owe it to them. So you would hit the financial $. This will bring up their record. Now, this is in the case of a credit card. As remember, we saw view and refund. If you click refund, then it'll show you that the maximum refund, obviously, is the amount that we have as a credit balance. And here's exactly to your point. If it was someone who's, you know, we're taking the 20% takeaway, 20% of 90 is $18, so we'd refund them $72.
Mm-hmm.
Or if it, you know, and so forth. So again, you just put in the refund amount, click complete refund. You'll see in red some of the same warnings that were described before. This is just within Learning Stream. I didn't put in that text. You know, recent transactions may not process, or older ones and things like that. Okay, moving right along. Now, other kinds of refunds, other than integrated payment, in other words, other than credit cards or electronic debit, on the events control panel, again, you click the financial icon, enter adjustment. I'm going to show this in a moment. Enter a negative amount and put in some description, and delete. You can also delete the original entry if you want. And I haven't gone through all of these different paths as to which one we'd absolutely want, but here it is. You go in and you click enter adjustment, get this screen, and you would issue a refund by making, you see, it's hard to see, it's minus 90 in there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Now, our past practice is that we notify bookkeeping to issue a check. Is that right?
Yes, Sheila. Mm.
Right. So notify Sheila to issue a refund check. Now, it's not going to be possible for Philosophy Works because we don't have an address for them.
Mm.
But I'm
Where they're
getting-
not paying any money anyway, so.
That's a great point, Kathy. Thank you. So, yeah, and deduct the 20% and give them back nothing. So, moving right along. All right. You can also delete a payment transaction. I haven't really thought through why you want to. Let's say
Yeah.
somebody handed you a check and you're not really issuing a refund. They said, look, I'm not doing this. Tear up the check. You could simply delete. You would go in, again, you would see it sitting there, and there's that delete button. And you could simply delete it.
Okay.
Randolph,
Yes, Barry.
theoretically, of course, you mentioned someone registering and 10 minutes later coming back and saying cancel. Suppose that person paid by credit card 10 minutes before.
You may not be able to get rid of it. Is what I'm. You may have to diary it and
That's
tell
not
them.
the question.
I'm sorry.
The
Go ahead.
question is, would we still take the 20%?
What do you think?
Yes.
Oh,
I would
Yeah.
say no.
I
What?
would say no.
I would say no.
If it went through, you'd have to take it, no?
But they didn't go to class. Or
I would still. Well, Charlene, to just the balance on the other side. The other people were taking 20% don't go to class either.
Mm.
We're talking again. The policy is to get a refund. They have to come in before the first night of class, not come in or write to us.
Right.
After that, all they can get is a tuition refund. So that wouldn't govern what we're dealing with in the use case that Barry's presenting. What would govern is, in my view, it's unfortunate, but we'll lose the credit card fee.
Okay, fine.
I just think, again, we have to, and I'm being schooled in this as much as anyone with my nature. We have to think of the overall good name of the school. I mean, somebody goes out on Twitter or Facebook and posts something bad about us. It's worth a lot more than the $2 or $1.50 we're going to lose in registration. I appreciate it. We do have rules for a reason, but we got to temper it with a little bit of common sense.
Fine. Glad
Okay.
I brought it up.
I'm glad you did too. All right. So now let's say for some reason you need to edit the student's basic information. There is that first icon. It's a little hard to see here, but it looks kind of like a pencil on a piece of paper, right? Next to the, in this case,
Allison.
you have the edit, you have the financial, and this person's already canceled, so you don't even know the cancel button. That's a re-register. But you would click the first one, and you can change the basic information. And one thing I learned, which is kind of cool, is there's this view history button over on the right. And I'll show you in a moment what it looks like. It's a log. It's not a total student log, but it's for this student, for this course. Because remember, at this point, we're within the particular course or event. So what it looks like is all of the goings on. I mean, it may be a rare case that we actually look at it, but I thought it was kind of interesting that here's, the registration, it was confirmed, it was processed, something got up. I was playing around a lot with this one. So there's a lot of, puts and takes. This is one of my test cases. But if there is some question, it's a resource for you to go back and see, what happened here. All right, the history.
I noticed that in that log, there's no reference to us who did it.
That's unfortunate. Yeah. Who messed?
And who is the Joe?
Joe Bloggs. That was one of Mr. McLaren's favorite. That's the student.
Okay.
I think. Wait a minute.
But no, you have
No. Excuse me. This answers. You're absolutely right, Barry. That answers the question. Joe Bloggs was a fake administrator. The student's name is FN Test LN.
Right.
That's a test first and last name. No, you're absolutely right. Thank you for pointing that out. Joe Bloggs was a fake member of the team that I set up at one point. So yes, you see the user's name, not the student's name alongside you.
Great. Cool.
Good. Thank you. Okay, so editing the basic student information, you can also edit the basic information in their database record. But that, however, is not done by getting to the student underneath the event. We're no longer going through the event. You'll see in the heading, one of the major areas besides events, where you saw that listing of posted and non-posted events,
Right.
go to the database. And this is going to be a new thing, once we start getting players out there. Actually, I went through it rather quickly. As part of the registration, you actually sort of touch on the database. But now let's say you need to go in and change somebody's information. You can search you go to database, you're presented with a filter, you pick up the person you want, search for them, and then click edit, and there's the basic database information. Moving right along, you can also override a fee. Very straightforward. Just remember to use a minus sign to make a reduction. So in this example, I was just playing around with a $1 fee and reducing it in half. Excuse me. So the amount due is $1, but I'm reducing it by 50 cents. So then the amount due is 50 cents.
It's nice that it has the comments so you can say approved by.
Exactly. Yes, please use that.
Crowd.
That is useful, because if you go back in to edit it, you'll see those sitting there in the comments.
Right.
Okay. Now here we go to transferring. Again, it's got a two-step tango. One is to transfer the enrollment, and this would be when you go into editor registration. One of the options is to do a transfer. And when you click that, you'll actually be presented with all of the open classes to which you could transfer this person. So you would select, let's say somebody, again, enrolled in Philosophy 2 and they meant to go to Philosophy 3. Well, bad example, because then the monies are going to be an issue. But if they went from Philosophy 3 to Philosophy 4, or they signed up for I3 and they meant to sign up for I2, we get into those situations. You'll be able to do a transfer and then pick the target course from a list and select that one.
One moment. Now, as the course offerings increase, this list is going to be
Yeah, let's wait and
quite an
see what that
eyeful.
looks like. Let's wait and see what that looks like.
Okay.
Okay. I've got 15. I don't want to keep you longer. I've got 15
Right.
minutes and
Cool.
9
All right.
slides. I'm going to try to move along. So when you do the transfer of the registrant, you'll see over on the right, you can also transfer the balance, because you just took this person out of whatever the class is. And so in effect, they've got a $90, in this example, a $90 credit balance. There is a button to transfer the credit. And you'll then be presented with the target into which to transfer the balance. So select the destination event for the credit balance. And again, it's not the best illustration because I didn't have a lot of classes listed here. But why don't we, I'm going to move quickly through this. I realize I'm not really taking everything firmly, but let's wait till we get situations. Be in touch with your team lead. Be in touch with me or Karen. We're going to, coach you through all of this. But I think this should give you at least the framework.
Yeah.
And then you'll see particular situations if things are not understood. We'll talk.
And it gives the financials to the right class, if you're tracking the money.
That's right. Good. All right. So just some final elements before we conclude. A couple of reporting. The Administrative Payment Summary Report is what will replace what we know as the daily cash summary. When you close out your cash register, so to speak, for the day. There's an attendance sheet we'll look at. And this one is really something that Barry and Karen and I are going to look at as we're talking about a monthly closing process. Every month we provide financials to Sheila, today out of ActiveNet and partly out of LearningStream, tomorrow almost entirely out of LearningStream. That's not true, actually. We're going to continue the ActiveNet reporting because those on annual plan will continue to have monthly revenues coming in. But for us right now, we'll mainly look at these first two. So the first one, again, and now the Administrative Payment Summary Report, there are reports at two different levels. There are reports at an event-by-event level, which we'll see in a moment when we do the attendance sheet, but there are also reports that are across all events or some subset. And that is the nature of when you're closing out the day, you're not closing it out for part one separately from part two. You're saying what happened, all the finances that happened today. So you go up at the top, and by the way, this illustration isn't exactly correct. You're not going to see this interface or application or admin. I think you as basic users would just see these first four, but you will see reports within which you'll see finance, and you'll want to pick the payment summary. So it's reports, financial, payment summary. And as I said, it's effectively the daily close report, and the simplicity of it is you'll be presented with a little screen. Typically what you would put in is today's date in both the start date and the end date, and hit load report. And by the way, it'll come up as a display. You could do it as an Excel. I think if it comes up as a display, you should be able to route it to print, to put, wrap it around the monies and checks and put it in Sheila's mailbox kind of thing.
Don't you have to do location?
No. Oh, I'm sorry. You're absolutely right. And that's going to keep us out of harm's way on those days when Charlene is raking it in hand over fist. Right. You're absolutely right. You'll want to say New York for those in New York, and Hudson Valley for those upstate. Thank you.
Next term.
Yeah. So that's the simplicity of it. And then here's what it looks like. This was done for July 28th as the beginning and ending of day. That was a day that I probably brought over. I was probably playing around a little bit with a dollar check. I never sent reports to Sheila, so it didn't matter. So I faked it out. That was some of my test cases. But I also had a couple of credit card payments. It's probably before we actually activated credit card processing, so we didn't have to incur any expense. But it was good enough for generating this report. This was as if I registered 2 people during the course of the day by credit card. Now, of course, what you would be doing is you would see amounts under check and cash. You'd see the credit card also, but really what you're hoping is that the cash and check numbers add up to what you're putting in the envelope and wrapping this report around.
And we only have to do this report, if we have cash and checks. Is that correct?
Okay, good. Yeah, good. So that's that. And it's like the daily close. And then finally, this now is to do the attendance sheet. Now you have to go back into the event level. You're not doing it at that reports at the top. What you're doing is you're going into the event, you're selecting the desired course, and you should have seen how to do that by now. Then on the left-hand side, remember there were all these different functions? The bottom one is reports. When you click reports, it'll expand to these, 6 different plus signs. And if you expand the custom one, this was custom built for us by the Learning Stream folks. It's called the course attendance sheet. And when you click that, you will see some very simple parameters, whether you want it in landscape or portrait, the date range. They do highlight the fact, and we've all agreed this is sufficient, that it's only going to do a maximum of 20 dates. Now, for something for part 4, 5, and whatever, that's fine, because you only need 10 dates, 10 weeks. For something like part 1, when it's meeting 6 or 7 times a week, you're going to be able to basically get 2 weeks.
But there'll be unique classes, so it won't be an issue.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right. Oh, that's true too, Karen. You're absolutely right. Hey, yeah, you will be able to get from Monday night all 10 weeks. Excellent. Right. Thank you. Good, good, good. Okay. And then what you'll get should be very familiar to you because it was modeled very, very much on the ActiveNet report. The one thing I will point out, just so we don't get, if ever we're asked, how many times did somebody sign up, the totals that you see here are not their total attendance. Unless you happen to fit it all on one page, which apropos what Karen just said, it should fit on one page. But if for some reason, like in this example, we were going from September 9th to October 1st, when I go to the next week, if they only showed up one time, the total is going to be 1. It's not going to be 4. So it's not a running total of their total attendance. There are other ways that you would access that. But
Also, I've been overlapping weeks. So then when you get a new attendance sheet, they see some of the previous
it's absolutely, yes. Be creative, whatever you need in the field, but I'm thinking of it, to Karen's point, Philosophy Works should all fit on one sheet. However,
in the
Philosophy
future.
2, 3, 4, let's say 2, usually has been, I don't know, I haven't gotten the information yet, but if past practice is any indication, it's been, Monday night, Wednesday morning, Wednesday night, and Saturday morning. So 3 or 4 times a week. So if anything goes over 2 times a week, you're not going to be able to get the full 10 weeks in a 20-column report.
I'm pointing out that in some sheets, the total would not be accurate because it's overlapping the previous week.
That's what Randolph said.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is the total that you're seeing represents what's on the page.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Okay.
So moving right along, I think that's, oh yes, I have some homework.
Randolph, I have a.
Barry, just hold it.
Okay.
All right, so I have some homework that I'd like you to concentrate on over the next, I don't know, it'd be great if you could get it done within a week. It's not that burdensome. Here's what I'm going to ask you to do. Enroll yourself, but do it as an administrator. This violates what I've always said to you guys.
Yes.
All right.
In other words, I've always said that if you're an admin, don't register yourself. But this is a test case, okay? Right? I've always asked you to go on as a public user, so there's no, oh yeah, I paid by check, ha ha ha. No, and I don't know what happened to the check. Sheila must have lost. Okay, so enroll yourself and use the course that I've set up called Training Philosophy 3. I just changed that this morning. It used to say Training Philosophy 2, but Philosophy 2 is going to be free, so it won't be as much fun. So there's one that I've renamed Training Philosophy 3. Simulate that it was paid in full by check with a check number 12E79. Okay? Generate an attendance sheet for that same course for the period from January 6th to February 19th and email it to the registration inbox as an attached PDF.
Ooh.
If you want to do this on your service night and talk to your team lead, fine, but otherwise, in the privacy of your own home, you should be able to do that. And finally, generate a payment summary report, i.e. a daily close, for all classes from August 1st to the current date, whatever the current date is at the time you do this homework assignment. And save that as a PDF and send it also to Registration Act.
From August, did you say?
I did. It's more fun that way because if you do it from the current date, nobody signed up in Learning Stream since like September, right? There's nothing going on there since the 140 people or so, whatever that signed up. So good luck.
I have a question.
Just a moment, Charlene. I had stopped Barry. Barry, what was it you were going to say?
I was going to say, I think it would be prudent to start putting in location on the daily close. Because once registration opens for the rest of the school in the end of this term, you will be collecting money. Possibly. In
Yeah.
Hudson Valley too.
Yeah, good point. Very good. Charlene, did you want to say something?
Would it make sense to start entering students into the database so that
That's a very good point. The simple answer is no, and here's why. It generally does make sense, and I love your get ahead of the curve kind of thing. Excellent. But I'm still waiting to hear back from the leadership about certain attributes in the database. And I don't want to have to come back and tell you, oh, now you have to remove something or add something. So just stay tuned. Thank you for a good question. And if again, you're in a more controllable setting, given the numbers and your attention to those folks, that we couldn't, I wouldn't propose doing that in New York, although we'll see. We'll see. And again, people will be able to do this themselves, but they all will have to wait until, in order to, I don't think there's a way, to set up a database record out of the blue. You have to do it in the context of registering for something.
Oh,
That we're not ready to open yet.
Okay.
You could do it. You could follow up on your this good idea, but that other thing inhibits it. And wait until we can get the particulars all ironed out.
Randolph, would you like to suggest a subject heading to the emails we're sending?
No, I think I'll work it out. Be creative. Thank you.
Cool.
We were talking about 6 emails, 6 or 7. What? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, I mean, we can handle it.
×2, maybe. All right.
We'll have a contest. Who can have the most creative email subject? All right. Karen, I did have, and Barry, apropos the need to get a monthly closing report, and we'll go into this. I think we have some time set up for later to look at monthly closings. It's basically going into because again, when you're doing a financial closing, you're not within a particular course. So you're going into the reports from the top, not from the event, financial and then financial detail, and describing a time period. Let's say
You
the first
said later?
September.
You said
Sorry?
Did you say later?
I think we'll talk about it. It's on your calendar. If you're willing, if you're able and available. All right, I'm going to stop the recording.